sheets are available, and you can fill those out and indicate proponent, opponent, or neutral. If you have handouts, we'd ask that you give 10 copies. If you don't have it, let the pages know, and we will get them distributed to the committee. When you come to testify, please speak clearly into the microphone, state your name, then spell both your first and last names. We will be using the light system today. Obviously, today will be a 5-minute. So you'll have 4 minutes, yellow light for a minute, and then it'll be red. No displays with support or opposition to the bill, vocal or otherwise, will be allowed. The committee members that are with us today will introduce themselves, starting on my right.
Good morning, Rita Sanders, District 45, the Bellevue Offit Community.
Ray Aguilar, District 35, Grand Island.
John Lowe, District 37.
Steve Aller in District 33.
I'm Megan Hunt, and I represent District 8 in Omaha.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Danielle Conrad from North Lincoln. Fighting a little cold.
I'm with you on that. Senator Sanders is the vice chair. Dick Clark is legal counsel. Julie Condon is a committee clerk. And this morning we have Quinn and Ryan as our pages. And with that, I will hand the command over and head over to present.
We'll open our hearing on LB 143. Good morning, Senator Briese.
Good morning, and thank you, Vice Chair Sanders and members of the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. I'm Tom Briese, P-O-M-B-R-I-E-S-E. I represent District 41, and I'm here today to present LB 143. LB 143 would move Nebraska into year-round daylight savings time once 2 conditions are met. First, the federal government must allow states to make that change. And second, 3 of our neighboring states must pass similar bills. A growing number of states have implemented legislation allowing for year-round daylight savings time. As of this time 2 years ago, that number was 8. After the 2020 legislative session, it was 14. After the last legislative session, it was 19. So now 19 states have enacted similar legislation to adopt year-round daylight savings time, including our neighboring Wyoming and Colorado. After the end of the Second World War, daylight savings time was observed in some states, but not others, and began and ended on various days in those states, led to a very confusing few weeks every spring and fall. So the federal government in 1966 passed the Uniform Time Act. It allowed states to opt out of daylight savings time and go to year-round standard, but it also gave mandatory beginning and end dates for those states which do participate in daylight savings time. So this means that a state's choices are, as it stands now, year-round standard or changing our clocks twice a year under daylight savings time. It seems everyone in the state hates the idea of having to change their clocks twice a year. The feedback my office and others have gotten has been overwhelming. The opinions on some Facebook polls conducted by local media and from what my office has received points to as much as 85% of folks strongly supporting an end to changing our clocks twice a year. And they're not wrong. The reasons to stop changing our clocks are numerous, from parents calling to tell us that it makes it harder to get their children ready in the morning, to folks with epilepsy, especially parents of small children with the condition, telling us that it is dramatically more difficult to time their medication schedules, to hard scientific data from medical research that the practice actually costs lives, to studies pointing to reduced economic activity. And what about the medical impacts of changing our clocks? I've handed out, there are several handouts there. You can browse through at your leisure, and a lot of this is found in those handouts. But folks with epilepsy and other conditions causing seizures report seeing an increase in the week after the change. Heart attacks go up as well. A study by the University of Michigan, the University of Colorado, and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs in 2014 found a 24% increase in heart attacks on the Monday following the time change. Other studies have shown statistically significant increases for up to a week after that. A study by Finnish researchers in 2016 showed an increase in stroke of up to 25% for the 2 days following the springtime change. Another study by the University of Colorado of over 700,000 car accidents found a 6% increase in fatal car accidents in that week after changing times. An economist with the University of Oregon found a 6% increase in workplace injuries among miners. This practice, the changing of our clocks, is actually hurting and even killing people. The time change is also costing us money. For example, the workplace injuries I just mentioned were estimated to result in a 67% increase in lost workdays. The 2012 study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology showed a substantial decrease in worker activity and an increase in idle time in the mornings of the days following the time change. Between medical costs, sick days from heart attacks, strokes, and car accidents, lost work days from workplace injuries, and simple decreased efficiency at work, the costs do begin to add up. So I think a very strong argument can be made against continuing the practice of changing our clocks twice a year. And if we're going to quit changing our clocks, we've got two choices. We can go to year-round standard, or we can push for year-round daylight savings time. And we could go to year-round standard without congressional authorization. But with LB 143, I've landed on year-round daylight savings time. And why is that? And really, that is the potential increase in economic activity that could flow from year-round daylight savings time. We talk about growing our state all the time and generating economic activity, creating opportunity for our citizens, and promoting growth. I would suggest that year-round daylight savings time could be a valuable tool in our efforts to grow our state's economy. Commentary suggests a net increase in consumer spending and hence economic activity flowing from an extra hour of daylight in the evening. Among those handouts, there should be an article in 2009 from NPR where one author suggested that daylight savings time, quote, has been a fantastically effective retail spending plan, unquote. And that commentator doesn't cite any sources. And again, that was in 2009. There's another piece in there is an article written by former U.S. Senator Orrin Hatch. In it, he makes a case for year-round daylight savings time as we try to put the pandemic behind us, noting it would, quote, encourage shopping and retail sales during the winter months, unquote. I also distributed, I believe, another article from CNBC that touted the beneficial impact on the economy flowing from daylight savings time. And there are an article in there, I guess there's a couple articles in there citing a study from JP Morgan Chase and Company. And I handed out that study, should be in the packet there somewhere. In it, JP Morgan and Chase in November of 16 undertook to assess the economic impact of daylight savings time. They did this by looking at the economic activity for the 30-day periods immediately after the beginning of standard time and immediately after the beginning of daylight savings time in 3 urban areas and comparing it to the activity found in Phoenix, where daylight savings time is not recognized. Again, during those same 30-day periods. The urban areas they looked at included Los Angeles, Denver, and San Diego. They compared credit card usage during the months of November and then March into April. And they compared that data with each of those urban areas to that in Phoenix. And in it, they found an average increase in credit card activity of 1.5% for the 30 days immediately following the start of daylight savings time in those other urban areas compared to Phoenix. And it varied between LA, San Diego, and Denver, 0.9%, 2.9%, 0.8%. And they also found an average decrease of 3.5% for the 30 days following the start of standard time. And again, those numbers vary between those various urban areas, but the average was 3.5%. And again, note the data varied between those cities, but their data does raise some intriguing considerations, especially relative to that 3.5% decrease in credit card activity following the change to standard time as compared to Phoenix. And you can run the numbers and speculate on this, but consumer spending in Nebraska, depending on the source, roughly equals $79 billion per year. And I think that was a couple of years ago. And for the sake of simplicity, that would equal a little over $6.5 billion per month. And now the Chase study suggested a 3.5% drop off that first 30 days. And what about the entire 4-month period that we're talking about converting? And the study doesn't provide data on the entire 4-month period, so we're kind of left to surmise on that. But if we would estimate it would generate a 2% bump in economic activity for for the 4-month winter period, what are we dealing with? And we'd be talking there about $530 million in increased consumer spending. And again, these numbers are admittedly speculative, but they also may be conservative. So what's the impact of $530 million in increased consumer spending over that period? And an economist would plug in an in-plan multiplier and multiply that by 2 to 3 or some other number. And but again, we're left to speculate here, but you're talking about more income, you're talking about more investment, you're talking about more jobs, you're talking about more state revenue. And again, we're left to speculate, but the point really is this: an extra hour of daylight during those 4 winter months can yield extra consumer activity, extra spending, and yes, enhance economic activity in our state. And that's good for Nebraska. So if you're looking for ways to grow our state, we all should be, this is one avenue that arguably could help us in that endeavor. And finally, there have periodically been bills in Congress to allow this change to convert to year-round daylight savings time to happen. And furthermore, in 2017, no states had passed such legislation. And again, as of today, there's 19 states, including Wyoming and Colorado. So there is a trend here. And as more and more states adopt this, it becomes more likely that Congress would act, I believe, sooner rather than later. And once something passes at the federal level, the dominoes on this, I would submit, are going to begin falling very quickly. And when that happens, I don't think we want to be left behind, and we want to be ready to go on it. And so I would ask for your consideration of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Briese. Are there any questions? Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sanders. Thanks for bringing this bill, Senator Briese. I say every single year that you bring this, I get more calls in my office about this bill than anything else. I think that there's more support for this than anything else I've ever co-sponsored or supported or had in front of me in committee. And so thank you for bringing this bill back. Is this basically the same as bills you've introduced in the past around this? Are there any significant changes in LB 143?
No significant changes that I can think of.
Okay. I'm looking at page 3 of the bill, which talks about how this subsection becomes operative. So it becomes operative if 3 of our neighboring states adopt the same law. Is that right?
Yes.
And we have 2 currently.
Yes.
So, and then there's an and. So that has to happen. And it has to be permissible by the United States,
Yes.
the laws of the United States Secretary of Transportation. Is
Yeah.
it currently legal?
No.
They would have to pass another
Yes,
law?
yes.
Okay.
And there have been proposals to do that, but nothing has passed yet. And over the years, I think Trump pushed it, and Marco Rubio, I remember, pushed it, and I don't know, various other folks have pushed the idea. And I don't
Okay.
recall who else. And don't know what the status of it is right now in Washington.
So the order of operations would have to be, we pass LB 143, one of our neighbors does too, and we have change at the federal level. And then everyone in Nebraska can
We'd be on our
finally be happy and rest easy.
way. We'd be on our way.
Thank you, Senator Briese.
Thank you for the question. I would add, I hate to admit it, but I tell people that this is the most popular bill I've ever introduced. I hate to admit that some of my bills aren't that popular. But yes, I think
It's
this
a real
is-
bipartisan.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot of bipartisan support, but obviously there's, some opponents to it as well.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Good questions. Senator Lowe.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thanks, Senator Briese. I think I asked this question last time you brought the bill. How will I know when to change my fire alarm battery?
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog, good point.
There you go. Good question. Oh,
Are there any other questions? I can't see you way over there. Seeing none, thank you, Senator Briese. We'll now open for testimony. Are there any proponents? Good morning.
Good morning, Vice Chairwoman Sanders, members of the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. My name is Joe Kohut, J-O-E-K-O-H-O-U-T, and I appear before you today on behalf of the Nebraska Golf Alliance, which is an organization comprised of several statewide golf-affiliated businesses, including the Nebraska Section PGA, the Nebraska Club Managers Association, and the Nebraska Golf Course Superintendents Association, in support of LB 143, a bill that provides for year-round daylight savings time. Many thanks to Senator Briese for his continued efforts on this bill. In Nebraska, there are over 300 golf courses that make up a combination of 9 and 18-hole facilities. The dedicated men and women who operate these courses rely heavily upon members, customers, and guests who play golf after 4:00 p.m. Many of these individuals take part in golf leagues across the state. The information we have is all pre-pandemic and a bit dated, but the following are just a few of examples. A municipal golf course system that hosts over 40 evening leagues with over 1,300 golfers from mid-March through Labor Day derived $762,000 in revenue from 4:30 to 4:30 p.m. until dark in 2016. A prominent daily course and fee course in Omaha stated that in 2016, Twilight Golf accounted for $70,000 per year, which included a round of golf, cart rental, or food and beverage. Continued light of day also makes it easier for golfers to play 18 holes of golf after work. One could argue that it's just an hour, but in the golf industry, it's not just the economic impact. We're also interested in the activity of those who use golf as their outlet for physical exercise. Psychological benefits included improved self-esteem, improved confidence, and reduced anxiety. Golf also provides a great opportunity in developing interpersonal skills, emotional control, and enhancing social connections. The Nebraska Golf Alliance urges you to advance LB 143. I appreciate your attention, Vice Chairwoman Sanders and members, and I'll try to answer any questions that you might have. One thing that I would note is, before I open up, is that I think we have been the only group that has been here every year when this introduced, and we started in a position of opposition when we talked about year-round standard. And the reason for that was because year-round standard, we lose that hour in the evening. And I really appreciate Senator Briese's movement towards where we're at today, which is adding that time. So with that, I will then stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cohout. You have questions? Senator
Vice Chair.
Halloran.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sanders. 2 questions. Will this help my golf score?
Senator, I don't know.
The second question is,
We can help. We have members of our group that are happy to work with you
okay.
on your swing.
Second point I would like to make, I would challenge your comment about golf helping your emotional control. So far,
Okay.
that's not worked for me, but
All right. I'll take that back and see what we can get you.
that's all.
Are there any other questions? This is truly like time is money equals golf, right?
Right.
It's a big deal.
Right. And one thing, Senator, I would just say is when you look particularly is that a lot of those municipal leagues, those owned by cities, et cetera, this is really their bread and butter for how they make those their year work, right? I mean, it's expensive to put fertilizer on courses and to pay staff and do those things. They really rely on those leagues as much as they can for revenue. So, yeah.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there other proponents? Are there any opponents? Please.
Somebody has to be contrarian.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Vice Chairman Sanders and members of the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. My name is Jim Tim, Jimtimm. That does rhyme. I am the President and Executive Director of the Nebraska Broadcasters Association. We represent 40-some companies with over 200 radio and television signals that operate here in the state of Nebraska. We represent their best interests. I'm here to testify in opposition to LB 143 on behalf of our membership, as year-round daylight savings time would actually be very disruptive to our industry. And because of the people we serve, it would be disruptive to the citizens of our state and to businesses that rely on stations for their advertising messages as well. Notwithstanding the great comments from Senator Briese, I'm well aware of public sentiment that we would all love to not have to change clocks twice a year, but there's another side of this that could impact what people rely on from our members on a daily basis. Broadcasters oppose state-by-state time shifts because adopting different time standards would make program scheduling as chaotic as the patchwork time zone map itself if only 3 of our neighboring states are potentially looking at different times each day than we are. This would be especially problematic in TV and radio markets that stretch across state lines, such as the designated market areas or DMAs of Omaha, Omaha Council Bluffs, Cheyenne, Scotts Bluff. But this would also be an issue for our radio members that operate out of places like Chadron, Falls City, McCook, Superior, Valentine, Wayne, and others around our state that serve people in Nebraska and across state lines, many of people who shop here, work here, but might live on the other side of a border. Morning drive time programming in radio and TV is strategically structured to meet the schedules of how we start our day. There's a lot of thought and planning that goes into providing news, weather, traffic delays, other information that people rely on to start their day. So disrupting this schedule by an hour for even a few months each year would result in lost audience for these stations. That in turn leads to lost advertising revenue. And that in turn makes it more difficult for these federally licensed stations to fulfill their obligation to serve the public. Year-round daylight saving time would also place an added burden on Nebraska's 45 AM radio stations across the state. AM stations already have to operate on reduced power overnight. They can power up at sunrise, but they have to reduce their power and change the direction or the pattern of their signal at sunset each night. So with limited full power hours during which AM stations can operate as it is, losing morning audience in particular to this kind of a change would be a very negative impact. And additionally, for television station programming that may comply with FCC rules for the time a program is permitted to air in one state, it might be a violation in a state across a line. As Senator Briese referenced earlier, in the early part of the 20th century, when the country was not at war, states individually chose whether and when to change time standards. This patchwork approach caused problems, which led Congress to pass the Uniform Time Act of 1966. And this law imposed uniform time observance across the country, including setting annual beginning and end dates for DST. The unintended consequences of individual state time changes would bring these significant operational and financial challenges to our members and ultimately could disrupt the flow of information to people that they're accustomed to receiving at certain times of the day. So we believe it should be left to Congress to uphold the reasoning behind the Uniform Time Act by ensuring that states in the same time zones remain aligned. And we respectfully ask that you not allow 143 to pass as proposed. Thank you for your consideration. Can I answer any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Tim. Are there any questions? Senator Lowe?
Thank you, Mr. Tim, for being here and explaining your situation. What do stations along the time zones, Mountain Time, Central Time, how do they cope with the different times? Because they broadcast over both KODY and North Platte.
That's a very good question. The fact of the matter is people have adjusted. People that have to travel from one time zone to the other for work or for school activity, they figure it out. And at the end of the day, what we're faced with here is along that line of Central and Mountain Time in our state, we now have the potential of a broader statewide issue of having to figure that out. And in this case, we think the impact could be much more damaging than it's been for all the years that people on the line you're mentioning have figured out how to adjust for it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Conrad?
Thanks, Senator Sanders. Good to see you, Mr. Tim. Thank you for your information. I was just going to ask, kind of dovetailing off Senator Lowe's question, how do your counterparts operate in the states that, like Arizona, for example, that have taken a different track than Nebraska is presently on? Do you have a sense of that?
It's a good question, and it's kind of the same answer that I just gave Senator Lowe. At the end of the day, you compensate for it, you do your best and make the adjustments and try to still serve the public in the best manner that you can.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? See none. Thank you for your
Okay,
testimony.
thank you very much.
Are there other opponents? Are there any neutral to testify? See none. Senator Briese, would you like to close?
Yes, just very briefly. I appreciate the testimony here today, Mr. Cohout and Mr. Tim. Appreciate them coming and sharing their perspective. And I want to thank Senator Lowe and Senator Conrad for their question regarding the time zone issue and what about Arizona, places like that. And I believe the response was that people have adjusted, and I would maintain that they will probably be able to adjust to this. And we can lessen the negative, if there is a negative impact, we can lessen the impact. We could take 3 states, maybe we should take it up to 4 states. Maybe we should say if Iowa jumps in. But anyway, again, I think folks can adjust without any very serious negative impact. But again, I don't want to doubt Mr. Tim's testimony as well. So, but anyway, I think again they can adjust, and this could be made to work. Anyway, thank you for your consideration.
Any questions for Senator Briese? See none, thank you, and that
Thank
will
you.
close. We have letters of position letters, 22 proponents, 9 opponents, and 1 neutral to add to the record. Thank you, Senator Briese. This now closes the hearing on LB 143. We'll now open for LR 14C. Senator Briese.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Sanders, and good morning again, Vice Chair and members of the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. I'm Tom Briese, TOM-BRIESE. I represent the 41st District, and I'm here today to present LR 14CA. LR 14CA is a proposed constitutional amendment to allow for voters to recall state senators and statewide elected officials. Nebraska's Constitution places a strong emphasis on the power of the people, who are oftentimes referred to as the second house of the Nebraska Legislature. We're the only state in which every single bill gets a hearing, where the public is allowed to weigh in, and our government operates with a level of transparency which is rarely seen elsewhere. I believe that LR 14CA is in keeping with these principles, which a vast majority of Nebraskans support. Some folks have questioned the necessity of this bill, citing the fact that elections for our legislative and gubernatorial offices and other statewide elective offices occur every 4 years, and that the process to initiate a recall, collect signatures, and get the question on the ballot might take a year or more. But I'd counter that a bad actor in an elected office can do a whole lot of damage in the time leading up to the next election. And this idea was actually brought to me by a constituent from my district who questioned why he, as a local elected official, is subject to the possibility of recall, while those of us in Lincoln are not. And in my opinion, that is a fair point. I don't anticipate this measure being used often, if at all. Implementation of this measure would be left to the legislature. We would have the responsibility of establishing the parameters for getting a recall on the ballot. For example, how many voters in each part of the state or legislative district would need to sign on to a petition, how long they would have to collect signatures, et cetera. So we can make the parameters as restrictive as we deem necessary, but one would think that we should somewhat replicate the standards for recalls of local officials. And what might that look like? Current recall statutes relative to local officials typically require a petition demanding a recall vote be signed by a number of voters equal to at least 35% of the total vote cast for that office. Obviously, several details have to be worked out, but I would submit that that same standard would be workable here and perhaps should be the target. Currently, 20 other states allow for the recall of a governor and 19 for the recall of state representatives. And I think I passed out a handout that describes the state of affairs in other states. And only 2 governors have ever successfully been recalled, and only 22 state legislatures have been successfully recalled from office since, I believe, 1913. So this would not be used much, if at all, but I think it's always a good thing to put power in the hands of the second house, and this is really an effort to do that. And so I'd ask the committee to consider this resolution, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Briese. Are there questions? See none. Oh, Senator Lowe.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator Briese, for this. So the recall, would it be a statewide petition to recall a state senator or a district?
I would envision a district-wide petition to recall a senator with 35% of, well, we could establish the parameters. And again, we could establish the parameters any way we wanted to. We would want to follow the spirit of what the voters would put in place with this, but
Kind of the same voters that put the person there. Would be the
yes,
same
yes, I think very much so, I would say.
Thank you.
Senator Aguilar.
Yeah, Senator Briese, the constituents that brought you this bill, were they angry with you?
With anger. Fair point, Senator. Maybe I should back away a little bit.
Any other questions? See none? Thank you, Senator Briese.
Thank you.
We'll now open for proponents on this bill. And it's a resolution. For the record, it's a resolution. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, thank you. Connie Ranke, ConnieReINke. I am a proponent of this bill for the ability of the people to recall, as Senator Briese said, and thank you for introducing this, Senator. In the handouts, you'll see some of the information I collected from other states and what their statutes state. The first one is in West Virginia, and so you can see what they're considering would be the need for a recall, and they outline the specific points. I believe the threshold should be a smaller percentage of votes cast, and I've listed that out, of possibly 3% of the votes cast with 120 days, and to do a simultaneous recall election, and that would be, that's listed here, but it would be a recall where the first question is, should this person be recalled? And then have where the votes could be taken at the same time. So you wouldn't be having two separate elections, one to remove, one to put someone else in place. If there's a critical need for this, I think it should be taken care of quickly. I have experienced in Nebraska working with the Secretary of State, working with a lot of the counties who have felt that the counties have their jurisdiction over the election. And that has been resisted, and I think the Constitution states that the people choose representatives, and I have a statute, I thought I had brought it, but I can send it to you, that those local elections are under their jurisdiction, and we need to make sure that the control of everything isn't coming from the top, that it's the people and the local government and those choices to run their government as they wish. The Secretary of State does have ability to choose specific things and have requirements, but since we put these computers into place, the databases are statewide. The computer system is statewide. So instead of counties having a local jurisdiction, they are from a top-down control standpoint. And I don't believe that that's what the Constitution states or tells us. And so in Nebraska, we have incredible amounts of problems going on. People told they already voted. If you want a ballot harvest, sure, you can. I had a retired police officer call me, and he said, I've been a Republican for 30 years. And on the last election, it was changed to nonpartisan. So his ballot, he had to do a provisional ballot. In Saline County, they had so many provisional ballots that they had to use the express vote machine to vote on, which is it's capable of connection to the internet, which we found in some Lancaster County express votes. And so signatures not being required on checking the outside envelopes of votes or on registrations. We trust everybody in Nebraska. We trust them. We don't have laws in place to protect all these things. And I just ask for you to support this bill and all of the bills related to safeguarding our elections. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for Ms. Winke? I see none. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there other proponents that would like to testify? Any opponents? Anyone in the neutral? Senator Briese, would you like to close?
I'd just like to thank the testifier for coming in and sharing her observations with us, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I would waive closing.
Any questions for Senator Briese? See none. I do want to say for the record, proponent on line 15, opponents 1, neutral 0. Thank you very much.
Thank
This
you, everyone.
closes our hearing on LR 14CA. Good afternoon. Are you testifying for Senator Bostar?
Yep.
Welcome. We have to have a hearing on LB 208. Thank you.
Good morning, Vice Chair Sanders and members of the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. Senator Bostar wishes he could be here, but is introducing a bill in another committee. My name is Nathan Janulewicz. That's Nathan Janulewicz. I'm the legislative aide for Senator Elliott Bostar. I'm here today to present LB 208, a bill that prohibits counties from forbidding short-term rentals on residential property. LB 208 simply expands on legislation passed in 2019 that prevented cities, towns, and villages from outright forbidding short-term rentals. Many people use online platforms to list and book accommodations around the world. In a 12-month period ending in September of 2022, Nebraska hosts earned an approximate $30 million on income on one platform alone. This bill does not restrict counties from creating ordinances and regulations to address public health and safety concerns, which is consistent with current state statute regarding long-term rentals. LB 208 does not supersede rules and regulations of private entities, including of a homeowners association organized under the Condominium Property Act or the Nebraska Condominium Act. The broader intent of this bill is to ensure that individuals are subject to consistent legal treatment regarding the ability to rent their property within or beyond municipal boundaries. Senator Bostar introduced this exact legislation 2 years ago, LB 631, and this committee unanimously advanced the bill to general file. I respectfully request your support of LB 208. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Nathan? See none. Thank you. Are there any proponents who would like to testify on this bill? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Vice Chair Sanders, members of the Government Affairs Committee. My name is Tyson Franzen, spelled Tyson Franzen. And I am here today in support of LB 208. I own 61 and a half of wooded acres in Odo County, purchased in 2017. Sorry, I just had to run to the bathroom and was running back here to
We have
catch my
time.
breath,
Take
yeah.
a breath.
So anyway, I own 61 and a half wooded acres in Odo County. We've been using an app called HipCamp. Think like Airbnb, but instead of renting out a room, you rent out a spot in your backyard for tents or someone's potential camper. We also had a camper listed on Airbnb, but We learned quickly in Otoe County that you have to have a conditional use permit to charge the public a fee. Those conditions are essentially the rules and regs of Otoe County. The closest thing to hip camp short-term sharing to the county was a campground. And to be a campground, that requires 12-foot wide rock roads, full electric, water, and septic hookups, among other things that would require a very, very large investment that we can't afford, nor do we want to. As an avid Nebraskan, I think our state has a lot to offer in tourism. It's a shame that private landowners aren't able to provide and share their piece of heaven. Think Chimney Rock, Snake River Falls, with other U.S. citizens that simply think that we're a flyover state. During our time of doing short-term sharing, the limited time that we had, we met people from all over the country that they had no idea Nebraska could be so scenic and also filled with Nebraska nice. I am in full support of Nebraska counties being able to create regulations that keep our state safe and sustainable per the verbiage in LB 208. I understand the need for proper planning and growth of a county that takes into consideration the needs of everyone in the county. I am in support of paying the 1% state and the 2% Otoe County lodging taxes. Airbnb even allows us to charge a cleaning service fee that supports the employment of others. However, I am not in support of the conditional use permit fees tied to specific permits implemented to be able to simply charge the public a fee. As short-term sharing wasn't on the radar of the county officials, the closest we fit into their rules and regs was the campground, which in turn came with that $600 conditional use permit fee and a large investment to meet the requirements of a campground. I feel this is essentially the same thing as a ban on short-term sharing, as it'll dissuade people from doing it at all. So we were denied the permit and not given back the permit fee as well. So at minimum, I'm hoping LB 208 can create a path for a county to amend their rules and regulations to allow short-term sharing and to implement rules for the greater good of everyone in the counties of Nebraska. If put into effect, it'd aid in Nebraska tourism and provide some extra income to help alleviate soaring property taxes. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. I do have a question. So would it be considered primitive camping, which is allowed on your property?
Yes, it would be primitive if somebody had electric hookup on their property for, say, their cousin's uncle's camper or something like that. Sure, that would be as well. But I think 2 years ago, the term boondocking was brought up. I think that was you that asked that. Yeah, so yes, it would be forbidden.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Senator Hunt?
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Thanks for coming, sir, and sharing about your entrepreneurial spirit with the land that you have. I don't have a question for you, but I have a comment since we don't traditionally ask questions of introducers if they are staff, but I wanted to get a concern on the record, which is I know some bills like this have been opposed because of the trend we've seen in bigger cities of big developers coming and buying apartments or redeveloping, buildings and basically pricing people out of neighborhoods. So kind of gentrifying, I guess, by buying a big apartment building and then turning them all into Airbnbs, and then it contributes to the housing problem. That's obviously not what you're doing. It doesn't affect you, but I would want to state that concern for the record and just see if I can talk to the introducer later about his thoughts on that, and if there's any other protections we can put in this bill just to protect the housing stock that we do have in Omaha and Lincoln. I think would probably be mostly affected by that. But what you're doing sounds amazing, and I hope you're very successful with it.
Well, to get there, we're going to have to get rules and regulations changed one way or the other. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Lowe.
Thank you. And thanks for coming to testify. Have you spoken with the county board at all?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure this was put into place long ago, and with the changing times, they may be, I don't see them here in opposition, so.
It was in 2019 when we went in front of the county planning board, and then they made their decision to deny it. Then we went in front of the county commissioners, and they agreed that since it didn't fit in their rules and regulations, that they couldn't approve it. So I tried working to get in there and say, hey, can we put something in there? And it's too new. It's something that no other county in Nebraska has done. So who wants to be the first to implement it? Even though in 2019, LB 57 was passed as essentially the same verbiage, but still, that's why I'm here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Are there any other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other proponents? Any opponents that would like to testify?
Maybe I spoke to you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Members of the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee, my name is Timothy C. Melcher, Timothy, C as in Clifford, M as in Mike, ELCHER, appearing on behalf of Nebraskans Unafraid to oppose this bill. We are a grassroots organization that addresses issues surrounding the sex offense registry, such as homelessness, unemployment, and vigilante crime, including murder. It's important to note that these issues not only affect registrants, but their families as well. Life on the registry is extremely difficult. There are numerous legal and private restrictions on where a registrant can live. In any municipality, nearly all apartment complexes will deny a registrant's application, even if their crime was not a felony. In Omaha, for example, there are only about 21 complexes of the 450 that I have contacted that may accept a registrant. On top of that, there's city ordinances that restrict where a registrant can live. In Norfolk, a registrant must live at least 500 feet from a school or daycare. With the number of daycares in Norfolk, finding a place to live there is a challenge. Faced with such challenges, registrants often become homeless. When this happens, they must personally appear before the sheriff's office every 30 days to register that they are intransient. In Nebraska, there is only one homeless shelter in the entire state that will accept registrants. This bill personally resonates with me. When I moved to Omaha, I still owned a house in Pierce. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to find a place to live, so to comply with the law, I stayed at a friend's house for 2 days, then drove back to Pierce the third night, which I think that's about 125 miles. Around wintertime, those options were no longer available, and I slept in my car. That was the winter of 2018. That winter, we had nights that were 20 degrees below zero. Eventually, one of my friends insisted that I move in with her at the Bull Durham in February of 2019. She told me not to change my address, but I had to register it in order to avoid a felony charge for failing to register. My house was one of many that flooded in March of 2019. I had to sell, so that fallback was no longer available. This became an issue in June of 2019 when the landlord gave me 15 days to move out. With nowhere else to register my address, my mom rented an Airbnb for me in her name. When she switched it over to my name, Airbnb did a background check and closed the account. Then she found Verbo. I ended up staying there for a month or two until I found something on Craigslist. The short-term rentals are one of the few options registrants have for housing. By excluding registrants from these under subsection 5A, you are leaving virtually nowhere for them to live. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? See none. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there any other opponents on this bill? Neutral testifiers? See none. Would you like to close? Waves closing. Thank you. We do have for the record online positions, proponent 1, opponents 4, and 1 neutral. And this closes the hearing for LB 208. Thank you.